Welcome back to another video from Notebook Check, where I'm taking a look at the Huawei P10 and the P10 Plus. I'm not going to bring you a review of the Huawei P10 and P10 Plus. Those full reviews are already up on our website, and a lot of people have done better jobs than I will be able to do about showing you the overall smartphone and the features of that smartphone. What I'm going to do in this video, though, is concentrate on the cameras. I've been using the P10 for at least a month, and I've been using the P10 Plus for the last week. I've done some comparisons right down to analysis of raw photos from the two devices. In this video, I'll show you the difference between the two cameras, but I'll also go and show you some of the features and how to use that P10, what it's good for, and a few tips and tricks about how to get the best out of the Huawei P10 and P10 Plus cameras. So before I give you some of my opinion on the Huawei P10 and also the P10 Plus, let's take a look at some of the test results from the Notebook Check full review. And we're talking about an 89% score here, and that's very good. I think that's a top 10 smartphone score for 2017. Generally, everything's pretty good. You might want to mark it down for just having a 1080p screen, but it is a good screen. There's a good brightness. Colors, I think on the first version I had, and that was a sample device from Huawei back at Mobile World Congress, had a slight blue tint to the screen. You can tune that out with settings and get it to a little bit of a warmer setting, and that I found to be a lot better. The second one, I think, is a slightly warmer looking screen. Whether they've tweaked the firmware between the first version and the second version, I can't say, but it seems fine to me. Contrast is superb as well at around 1400 to 1. Now I've got the full review here, and I haven't actually looked at it. I've had the P10 since about 3 weeks after Mobile World Congress, so that's most of March, April and May as well. And so I didn't really need to look at the full review, but I'm just going to have a quick look now and pull out some points for you. I said 89%. The other thing I want to point out is the performance results. We're up there in the top end of performance test results. The Antutu benchmark is really high up there with the iPhone 7 as well, so no problems there. There's a little bit of an issue with Wi-Fi performance, and that's direct Wi-Fi performance to a device on the same network through an AC hotspot. Maybe not as good as it could be on some other devices. 54 megabits per second transmit rate is not that high. It would be much nicer to see that up over 300 megabits per second. I certainly haven't noticed that issue. I'm more interested in reception rather than throughput. I want a stable throughput rather than local reception that's got a very high throughput. Battery life for me has been fantastic. If we look at the battery life reports on Notebook Check, we're seeing 16 hours of battery life on Wi-Fi browsing, and that's great. Big Butt Bunny playback, so that's a 1080p video, H.264, 9 hours. Now let's talk about the camera and the video. And I'll bring in some of my opinions now as well, because I think this dual camera setup, it's slightly different, but I think it has a couple of cool features over and above, say, the LG G6 and other cameras that have a dual camera. So this is a 20 megapixel color camera with a 12 megapixel black and white camera. What's happening is that Huawei are processing both those images using the black and white one for luminance and obviously the color image, and adding those together and giving you a really interesting post-processed JPEG image. When you look at the raw image, I'm assuming that comes from just the color sensor. if it's raw, it has to come from one of the sensors. Has to be the color sensor because it's a color raw image. Unless it's post-processed with the black and white image, in which case it's not a raw image, although they're putting out a raw image. So maybe it's processed but pre-JPEG process. I'm not sure. But if you look closely at those, you don't see as much detail in that raw image as you do in a final JPEG. So I'm guessing that it is raw from the color sensor only. So be aware of that. It looks like what's happening is these two images are being processed in a way that you probably couldn't do with just the single color image on a third-party piece of software. That's just my opinion. I've also done comparisons between the P10 and the P10 Plus. Now the P10 Plus has the faster lens. It's an f1.7 against the f2.2 of the P10. Now the P10 is fast. 2.2 is a nice fast speed. You'll get down to some reasonable low light. There's got an optical stabilizer in here as well, so you're getting some reasonable shoot times, some shutter times, which allow you to get some good light sensitivity. Having said that, the P10 Plus is obviously better. You can see more light. Importantly, though, I see more detail in the P10 Plus images. Certainly the raw images. Not so much in the JPEG post-processed images, but just slightly maybe. If I look at 10 or 20 post-processed images, I see slightly more detail in the P10 Plus. That means the P10 Plus is not only an f1.7 faster lens, it's possibly a better lens as well. It's allowing you to get more detail out of the sensor. Having said that, I went for the P10. I've actually bought this one here, the P10, over the P10 Plus because I like the compact nature of it. And to be honest, an f1.7 gives you such a fine depth of field that it's sometimes difficult to get focus on a subject. Certainly when you're close, you could be focusing on parts of a subject you don't really want to. So bear that in mind. f1.7 is great for really low light photography, but for daylight photography, if you're using that, you might find that the focus depth of field is a little bit too fine for you. Before I talk about the video, let me just mention you got 4 gigs of RAM in here, 64 gigs of storage, and that high-end processor. So you're really getting high-end specifications on the storage, the RAM, and the CPU. Now the storage can come in different versions. There's an eMMC version, a latest version of the eMMC protocol, which is not as fast as UFC or the UFS, sorry, storage on this. Now I was lucky, I've got the faster version, that's the 700 megabyte per second version of the storage. You might be unlucky and get a 200 megabyte per second version of the storage, which isn't actually that bad, but you might notice difference in program startup times. Right, let me talk a little bit more about the secondary features of that dual camera. So you've not only got the combination of the color and the black and white images, but you've also got some 3D information, some depth information that's used to do a couple of interesting things. First of all, they're giving you a software aperture mode, which means you can effectively bring in the depth of field, create a software bokeh effect, which is really nice to bring out a foreground subject. Beware it's not perfect, like most software bokeh functions are at the moment, but it's pretty damn good. If you actually are able to separate the foreground object without having any other stuff near it, you can do a pretty much perfect software bokeh. But you will get errors, for example, shooting through a wheel of a bike. I wasn't able to get the background to defocus. The other thing is Huawei have included some filters that use this depth information. So you can get, for example, monochrome background with a color foreground or a color subject. And although that's not very natural, it's a great way to create an effective image for Facebook, for Instagram, with very, very little effort. There are some nice filters there, and I hope Huawei built on those filters to create more useful ways to use that depth information, because it's definitely there and definitely useful. And I think in the future we're going to see a lot more of this software bokeh, and in fact I'm pretty sure we'll see this on high-end cameras into 2018 as soon as it gets good enough. Let me mention video right now, because I'm not happy with the video and I haven't seen enough mentioned about the video on the P10 and the P10 Plus. It's not stable, and by that I mean there's a jerkiness to the frame. Every maybe 20-30 frames it seems to be missing or buffering the frame. I can't imagine that it's a problem with the frame rate or the amount of data that's going through the phone, because it happens on 720p without stabilization, without autofocus, and the same thing happens at 4K as well. As you pan across, there's just a slight jerkiness, as something is being buffered and something not playing through to storage as well as it should be. That means that for the time being, you can't use this for any sort of pro level video. Now, I know we're talking smartphones here, but there are plenty of smartphones now being used for pro level video as a secondary camera, as the camera that you have with you that you need to use. Journalists, for example, interested in 4K that they can send back and have edited and zoomed down into sections of the image, software zoom, software pan, that sort of stuff. Unfortunately, there are issues with the Huawei P10 at the moment, and I hope that Huawei sort that out, because it looks like a software problem, some sort of buffering issue rather than a hardware issue. Let me summarize then. The P10 is a fantastic phone. Even before I looked at our review, it was one of the best phones that I've tested for a long time. And I've had the Pixel and I've tested the LG G6 as well. Haven't tested many of the iPhones, although we had the iPhone 7 in here and the iPad Pro, which also had the same sensor in. Those are great cameras. What I love about this is that it's compact. It has a great screen, great battery life. It's just all round well balanced, apart from that video. If you want a 4K screen, it hasn't got a 4K screen. Fingerprint sensor is not on the back, it's on the front. The Wi-Fi performance theoretically is a lot less than some other phones. In practice, I'm not sure that you'll notice that. And the same with that storage as well. You might get the 700 megabyte per second transfer rate. You might only get the 200 megabyte per second transfer rate version. You'll feel bad when you get that 200 megabyte per second version, but don't worry too much. We're talking about tenths of seconds in extended load times, and maybe 1 or 2 seconds if you're transferring a very large file or copying that file onto the device itself. So don't worry too much about that. Overall, the Huawei P10 gets from me a really good thumbs up. I recommend it. I bought it myself after testing the previous one for 2 months, and it's rare that someone would do that that's testing smartphones, because you're looking at the next thing coming down the line. The S8 was launched after the P10, and I wasn't interested in the S8. The price of this has come down 20% since it was launched as well. We're seeing offers at 499 euros, street prices of 550. The retail is only 599. So for a 64 gig, 4 megabyte RAM, 4 gigabyte RAM version, with that dual camera, the fast processor, it's a really good value device. I'm going to leave you with a couple more statistics and a couple of pros and cons from our full review at Notebook Check. And I'll keep note of the comments below. If you've got questions, don't forget to ask them in the YouTube video below. Please, if you got anything out of this, a thumbs up, share, subscribe, do anything you can to help us so that we can carry on giving you these detailed videos. One more thing I forgot to mention, 4K video on this is recorded in HEVC, that's H.265. Not a lot of PCs can handle that. My quad-core system with Iris Pro graphics couldn't handle it at all. So what I'll be doing is taking a Kaby Lake laptop. This is only a dual-core Ultrabook style 2-in-1. I'm expecting this to beat my quad-core because it supports hardware decoding and hardware encoding of HEVC. Bear that in mind if you want to use that 4K video. Bear in mind also that 4K video is not quite pro level in terms of smoothness, but let's assume Huawei fixed that problem. The 4K mode is excellent for post-processing, but you need an HEVC compatible decoder encoder to work with it, and YouTube won't accept it as a format unless you encode it into H.264. That's about it. As I said before, if you've got questions, don't forget to answer them. Don't forget to ask them in the comments below on YouTube. My name's Chippy. Thanks for watching.